Hello everybody from wherever you are in the world. This is Vince Benedetti from vbmusic.ch and greetings from Winterthur, Switzerland. If you're in the Anglosphere, it's Winterthur and not Winterthur, and it's Switzerland and not Sweden. Today I would like to talk about a theme or subject which is perhaps not known to so many. It concerns specifically how to construct a phrase or phrases over chord cadences. Normally we think of a tune as a bunch of changes, one after the other. But in fact, tunes, when you look a bit more closely, you will see that tunes consist of a series of chord groups, most of which are cadences. Now, what is a cadence? Without getting too much into the theory of cadences, let us just say that a cadence is a group of chords which have or has two states, a state of tension and a state of resolution. And the play between tension and resolution in a chord progression is what moves the music forward. It's what moves the tune forward. For instance, if I would be playing Body and Soul, well, the first chord is E flat minor 7. A bit louder maybe. Now I move to B flat 7, flat 9. That's a chord of tension. And then I move to E flat minor 7 again. Now that's a resolution. But of course we need to move further in the tune. So the next chord, A flat 7, somewhat altered. That's definitely a chord of tension. And then we move to D flat major, resolution. And then it continues. E flat minor 7, F minor 7, which is really kind of like D flat major 7, a third higher. And then we move to E natural diminished 7, definitely a chord of tension. We have to resolve, we resolve to E flat minor 7. Then we come to C minor 7 flat 5, F7 flat 9. That's definitely a chord of tension. Resolve to B flat minor 7. And then to E flat minor 7. A flat 7 again. There's your chord of tension. Resolution, D flat major 7. So today's example, which I've chosen, concerns a cadence which is very commonly encountered in the repertoire, and it's the cadence in the key of C major of F minor 7, B flat 7, C. So we're in the key of C major. Perhaps we have a C major 7 first, then we have an F minor 7, B flat 7, and then C. So if we were to construct a phrase or little melody over that, rather than thinking C major 7 as just alone, we want to think of C major 7, F minor 7, B flat 7 to C as an entire unit. In other words, we want to conceive of a phrase which will cover all of those chords. Now, if we take the example of Tad Dameron's composition, Lady Bird, now if we look closely at that, we have two measures of C major 7. And we have one measure of F minor 7. One measure of B flat 7. C major 7. From there continues the following phrase. So the idea is to conceive of a phrase which will span, as it were, all of those chords in that particular sequence or in that cadence. So let's take, for instance, the C major scale, which we know is going to be what we play over C major 7. Now everybody knows but I'm going to posit something else. We're going to take the scale from, rather than thinking of the scale from C to C, let's think of it from G to G. In other words, the C major scale beginning at G. Now that's where the melody of Lady Bird begins. Now if you look into the repertoire with more detail, you will notice many cases where the melody begins on the 5th. Alright, so let's look at that. Now what is the scale for F minor 7, B flat 7? We look at that as one thing. Really it's B flat 7, F minor 7 is a kind of a preparatory chord for it, but in any case the scale is the same. Normally we would think of, for instance, the B flat 7 scale basically as this. Which is really the scale of on the 5th degree of E flat major. But in this case we're not going to be resolving to E flat major, we're going to be resolving to C, which is a particular characteristic of this cadence. Rather than, so let's take that scale, the B flat 7 scale, or you can look at it as the F minor scale. Same notes from another place. But let's take that also from G as a common note. So that would be so what we have essentially is two scales, but we're going to take them from the same note. Just as the melody is so we're going to think around that note. F minor 7, B flat 7. Okay, now. So what are the differences between the two scales? Well, we have a number of shared notes. G is a shared note. C is a shared note, D is a shared note, and F is a shared note. But the notes that change, or the ones that are different, instead of A we have A flat, instead of B we have B flat, instead of E we have E flat. Now our melody in Lady Bird shows that. So you'll have B flat, A flat, E flat, C. So let's say we want to make a little something on top of that. For instance, we could say that's a little phrase which would cover the entire chord progression. Now I'll count it in time, 3, 4. So there you have it. There's a number of things you could do. Now, when talking about the content of an improvisation or an improvised phrase, it really can't be emphasized enough that in listening to those who came before us is kind of the sine qua non. That point cannot be emphasized enough. So what I'm showing now, the stuff I'm playing now, is mostly stuff which I've picked up along the way, and perhaps a small percentage of stuff that I've discovered through my own, experimentation, which belongs to the phenomena of creativity anyway. That's always been like that. But without that traditional thing, and by tradition I mean collective knowledge over time, I wouldn't have had anything to base my experimentations on, because it really doesn't come out of thin air. It doesn't come out of systems theory. It doesn't come out of extrapolating whatever kind of idea you want to do and then turn it into a formula. You can play music that way, but that's not what this is. This comes from the essential assumption that the idea of the whole thing is aesthetic. It has to be beautiful. It has to be not something that impresses you by its power. It impresses you by its feeling, by its depth, and that's what we learn from those who came before us. That's what we learn from all the way back to Louis Armstrong, and arguably before him, the greats of New Orleans, all up until Charlie Parker and into the hard bop and the post bop period, let's say. Okay, so what constitutes an improvised phrase? Well, there's different elements. For instance, a minute ago we saw that's kind of like a little scale thing with a few turns and a few little embellishments to it. There's another aspect, though, which is called a motif, or a little phrase which is kind of it's not just a scale. It has an interval. It has greater intervals than scales. For instance. Now that's what you call a motif, or sometimes you would say it's a little lick. Right? For instance, that's for instance direct quote from Joy Spring, almost. Okay, so let's take that little motif. Now, what if I change my chord now to F minor 7 B flat 7? Why not? So let's say 3, 4. So that motif can be repeated. It's a common device in music, repeating a motif and then making the correct adjustments if your harmony changes. So we went from, right? That's everything is the key of everything's the C scale there. But when we go to F minor 7 B flat 7, we need to make some adjustments. E flat instead of E. That's the only change that really happens. So you see the motive, or a motif, to pronounce it correctly, is that little phrase, which sounds good, so we take it and we move it to the next chord group, or the next chord group in the cadence, let's put it that way. So that's an element in melody, which has always been part of this tradition. Then, of course, there's the aspect of rhythm, how you divide your beats up, where you begin. For instance, there it was 1, right? But let's see, we could do something where we start a bit later. Let's see, 3, 4, 1. So 1, 2, and did it. 1. That's kind of like an earlier type of phrase, come perhaps out of a blues thing. So let's say I would take that little idea and take it into the next chord. 3, 4, 1. Now I had there's an A there, right? Then I have to make some changes. So 3, 4, 1. Right? So I modified it a little bit. 1. Then I can move into my next phrase beginning with the chord of C. For instance, to fill in the remaining space that we have. Now there are two things, of course, you're noticing from my approach. The first thing is I'm not putting any notes up, no written notes to give you. The reason for that is twofold. The first is that to do that would be extremely time consuming on my part, and I really don't have the time for that. And perhaps even more importantly is that it makes you use your ear, because music is a phenomenon about hearing and listening. It applies to how you conceive of a note, how you hear your chords, also how you play together in a group, you listen to each other. So, I mean, there's many levels to it. Getting back to the other thing about the rhythm and the phrasing, someone very good to listen to, of course, probably the best person to listen to is Charlie Parker in terms of how his songs were constructed, because they were basically kind of improvisations, and how he took rhythm and took beat division or metric division, and that formed the basis of his tune, of his tunes, plural. So look at what he's done with the rhythm. So basically the rhythm is, so it's 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. Basically what he's done there, he's taken 8 beats and the last 2 beats is a pickup to the following phrase. What's this one called? Au privat, is it? Now that begins the following phrase. So basically his underlying pulse is 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, 1, 2, 1. Or if you want to look at it in terms of 8 beats, it's 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5 and 6, 7, 8, 1. Now the 8-beat phrase is actually the actual smallest phrasal unit, if I may use that word, that we have in 4/4 time. Basically, it's 8 beats. But that's perhaps a theme for another day. So, I mean, all of these elements are to be thought of or to be considered in one's deliberations, in one's reflections, philosophically about how to approach this matter. And it's very important to listen to all of these people that came before us, because again, and that will be my last statement before reviewing the whole thing. is that tradition counts, tradition matters, because there's no such thing as somebody who takes something out of thin air and just all of a sudden comes up with something like this person is some great genius. It doesn't work that way. If you read the story of Charlie Parker, how he started, he came out of Kansas City, certain tradition, how he learned, he played that way, and then in his deliberations he discovered certain things, and he was in the right place at the right time. But without that background of being in Kansas City and having heard all of those who were contemporary of his, it never would have happened. So once more, let's look at all these main points. We've been in the key of C major. We've looked at the chord cadence: C, F minor 7, B flat 7, C. Now, just one small precision, one detail. The cadence itself is F minor 7, B flat 7, C. What comes before it can be another chord, C. It could also be F major. That's two examples. But the main cadence right now is F minor 7, B flat 7, C. It's a type of cadence that's called subdominant because it goes over the fourth degree before it comes to the 1. But I don't want to be too technical right now. That's something you can hold in your mind. Might help you understand a little bit better what's happening in these tunes. But this is a very, very common cadence. The second point is phrasing over the chord group or over the chord cadence. Conceive of your phrase so that it can span the chords in the cadence. And then to do that, look at the scales. For instance, if there's a difference in scales, as there is in this case, we have the C major scale, and then we have, let's say, the B flat 7 scale. What are the differences between those two scales? So the scale note comparison is important. So we saw that. E becomes E flat, A becomes A flat, B becomes B flat. And then the phrase starting note, or the scale starting note, we started on the 5th of C. And we use that as a common note also in the scale over F minor 7, B flat 7. We didn't go right away to F and then try to play a phrase with F and then to B flat and try to play a phrase in B flat. That's how it was when I started out. And then the last point is the rhythm and the phrasing, and that's critical. A lot of people play a lot of eighth notes. They think it's the greatest thing since apple pie. But the fact of the matter is it can be boring. Right, so I think that will be all. I thank you for looking at this video. I hope it's been useful. In addition, you will find a link to my website where you can download for free this particular cadence with 5-note voicings in 2 distinct types, which is basically known to all pianists. So that you can just download at your leisure. And thank you very much, and please tune back, and hope to see you next time for my next video.